What the f? What are you? Look at the pixels. You can count those. Look at this guy. Oh my god. So this game, it's crazy. So it's very CPU demanding, it's very GPU demanding, and it's very VRAM intensive. This is almost unacceptable, because who can play this? It doesn't matter how good your game looks or how good it plays if nobody can play it. Alright, we gotta talk about Monster Hunter Wilds. Obviously, this has been a very anticipated game, probably because the last game, Monster Hunter World, was very, very popular, and literally just within the past year, it's reached over 160,000 players on Steam, still maintaining to this day 40 to 50,000, maybe even 60 to 80,000 players. Now, the beta test for Monster Hunter Wilds has released, which is crazy because this game doesn't come out until February of next year, but it's early November of 2024 right now, and it's really far away. I don't know why the beta is so early. 460,000 people. All-time peak yesterday. I'm recording this really late at night right now, and there's still 162,000 people playing the game. It is nuts, guys. This game is popping off. And from my experience playing it, it's been quite fun, but I have a fear that all of the people that are playing this game right now are not having a very good experience, because this game is stupidly hard to run on your system. I don't think PS5 is going to have a good time running this either, so don't get me wrong there. But the system requirements came out, what, like a month ago? Was it a month ago? I'm not sure. But the minimum specs and everything doesn't seem that bad. This is targeting 1080p 30 FPS, and these aren't very new CPUs. They're pretty old, or at least a low-end, newer one. And the GPUs required aren't that high-end either, so this didn't seem that bad for minimum. But that's only 30 FPS at 1080p. And the real fear ends up, these aren't even running the game at 1080p. No, these are running from 720p and being upscaled to 1080p, which is just okay. If you want to go to recommended specs, it doesn't really look that bad. I'm a little fearful of is this is a relatively newer CPU. Same with this one too. And these are only targeting 60 FPS. And the GPUs down here don't really look that crazy. So that probably means we're going to be limited by CPU. And it gets even scarier when you see that this is only 1080p 60 FPS if you want to target this. It's with frame generation enabled. That means that we're frame generating from like 30 FPS or 40 FPS and going up to 60. This isn't even a native 60 FPS. And what if the frame generation doesn't look good? Frame generation increases your latency. The game is going to be less responsive. It might look smoother, it might look like it's 60 FPS, but it's not going to be responsive like that. And in a game like Monster Hunter Wilds, you actually need pretty quick response times. It's a combat game, multiplayer combat game, and if you just can't respond in time, well, you're going to get destroyed. Frame generation enabled and recommended just to get to 60 FPS. Usually frame generation would be like, oh, you're already at 60 FPS and you can go higher than that. Actually getting to the point where you need frame generation just to get a normal frame rate in the game. And I can tell you from the jump, when you launch up the game, you will be prompted if you want to use frame generation or not on the RX 6700 GPU, basically the PS5's GPU. FSR 3 frame generation, this is AMD's frame generation. It looks terrible. You see all of these artifacts around the characters as they move around. The shadow along the ground is also all artifacty and buggy looking. That's because of the frame generation. FSR 3 frame generation can look very good, but because from like 40 FPS to get up to 60, well, it's gonna look bad. The frames that it's interpolating between to make more frames, they're far apart. So it just looks like garbage. There's too much gap to make up. Right now, I actually have the RTX 4060 in my system right now. We can test out if this actually can achieve even 1080p on this. So you can see that we're in Monster Hunter Wilds here. All right, it's obviously the beta. Things could change. You can see this is actually rendered in real time, the opening scene here, 44 FPS. I also have some other stats that we'll talk about right below the frame rate and all that, and we'll talk about that, so don't worry. Let's see what the defaults is to with the recommended graphics card. Now I am on a 4K monitor, has graphics settings here, and it puts us on medium settings. Okay, we'll take a look at that later as well. NVIDIA DLSS is here, and it's putting us on performance upscaling right away with 50% sharpness. Frame generation is not enabled. By the way, if you do just want to see CPU testing, because it is really crazy, there are timestamps below if you are just interested in that. You can see here, right off the get-go, we have some issues, okay? Because we are at 4K, granted. It did say 1080p, so let's go ahead and just drop down the settings to 1080p and check that first. Their graphics settings menu is terrible, by the way. I hate this. It is really annoying to work with. Let's go to just 1080p native without any upscaling and see what the 4060 can do. And you can see the game looks a lot blurrier if you are on a 4K monitor watching this. And yeah, we can only achieve like, I mean like 40 FPS. The middle number on top is the average FPS, okay? Honestly, one of the most popular GPUs in the world now. And you know what's even crazier too? I'm on the fastest CPU in the world right now, until the 9800X3D comes out, but I'm on the Ryzen 7800X3D. It's the fastest gaming CPU available right now. But you can see that our GPU usage percentage isn't always maxed out, which means at times we're getting CPU limited. And especially if you go to areas with a lot of other players and stuff, you can start to get CPU limited, even on just a mid-range GPU. It is actually crazy how demanding this game is. It makes like no goddamn sense. So you can see that I have some stats listed up top here that are called GPU busy and the frame time average. What GPU busy is how long does it take the GPU to render a frame, and then the frame time average that's right below it is how long does it take the CPU to render a frame. If the GPU time lower than the CPU time, then you're going to be CPU limited because the GPU is working faster. If the GPU is taking longer to render a frame than your CPU is, then you're going to be GPU limited. It's relatively simple to understand. With those two numbers compared together, you can see to the right of it, there's actually a percentage marker that says 1% right now. And what that is the deviation. Sounds complex, it's not really that complex. How different are they from each other? The GPU is rendering frames, I think 2%, I think that's what this means, 2% faster than the CPU right now, which means that we are CPU limited. All right, so basically if that percentage goes up, we are more and more CPU limited. Right now, we're only on a mid-range GPU that really isn't that good for this generation, and we're getting CPU limited here. As you leave, this game is still extremely demanding, but I'm kind of walking out of the camp here. And I can call my, I forget what these are called. Yep, you can hop on it and ride around. It's pretty cool. Like, look at the world. It is really cool. This thing is actually, this game is doing pretty groundbreaking things. Like, this is a massive world. There's really dramatic weather, huge boss fights and everything. But you can see out here, we're not as CPU limited at times. Usually there will be a 1 to 2% deviation or something, so expect that. If it gets more than that, then we're starting to get CPU limited. But our GPU is only able to pump out like 40 FPS or something like that. And that kind of frame rate is what gets me like, oh, this is why they said frame generation was required. Is there any way to get this to run at 60 FPS at 1080p? We can try a little bit upscaling. We can try NVIDIA's DLSS here. Yes, this isn't 1080p anymore, but we can go to quality, upscaling. See that we were at like the low to mid 40s and now we're at like 50 or so. But we are starting to get a little bit CPU limited, which is just insane. This game is asking so much of the CPU right now. And the newer CPUs that are coming out, like the 9800X3D, isn't supposed to be that much faster than this one. It is doing new things, but at the same time, it's like, holy shit, how does it run this bad? It is also a beta. We'll see if it gets better. This doesn't necessarily surprise me because the last game that Capcom released was Dragon's Dogma 2, and that was also on the RE engine, just like this game is. And Dragon's Dogma 2, another open world game and stuff, it ran really bad too, especially in city spaces. It was terrible. We thought Cyberpunk was bad. We thought Alan Wake 2 was bad. You can't play this game. Like, you can't even hit 60 FPS. Frame generation was built into the recommended spec. So let's go ahead and turn on frame generation. We can try this and go from there. So we'll see. The game is broken right now. It's gonna come back. It feels really, really laggy. I don't know if you guys, this won't be perfectly in sync, but it's like, do you see that with my mouse? My camera isn't perfectly in sync with the gameplay, but this feels terrible. Let's turn off upscaling. Holy shit, bro. What is happening? Oh, wait, I think I know what's happening actually. Guys, our VRAM is getting maxed out. Oh my god, the mouse feels so bad. Holy shit. Well, let's turn on DLSS quality upscaling. Turn off frame generation. Okay, and then now the game's playable again. Okay, so the reason we got here is the 4060 is only an 8GB graphics card. Definitely pushing it. And frame generation, at least DLSS's frame generation, does use more VRAM when you turn it on. So right now we're chilling at about, you can see in the top left, at about 6.2 actually used VRAM, and then it's allocating almost 7GB. So we're already pushing it. So if we want to use frame generation, we're probably gonna have to go here, graphics settings, and let's just turn it down to medium again and see if that helps our VRAM usage. And you can see that does help our VRAM usage up there. So now we're below 6. And our frame rate is around 50 or so. Okay, now we can probably turn on frame generation and see what this does. So can we get over 60 with the fake frames? Yes, we can. And I can already see artifacts. You can kind of see here, like the coat that my guy's wearing kind of phases in and out of existence every now and then, which is kind of odd. But I guess we can get 60 FPS. I'm actually just like mind blown. If you go into the, the recommended specs, they say that frame generation is required for this mode. And the reason for that, it seems like, is actually because frame generation bypasses the CPU, because the GPU is entirely just interpolating completely new frames. So it doesn't need the CPU to do anything. And even the fastest CPU in the world can't run this game at 60 FPS. And like, what does that mean for all the other CPUs? I'll be checking I have a Ryzen 5900X, which is an older CPU. I'll be checking out just a little bit, see what that can even do. Not only is this game GPU demanding, it's also like exponentially more CPU demanding as well. I will say this doesn't feel terrible with the responsiveness. It doesn't feel god awful, and I'd say DLSS frame generation is looking a lot better in this game compared to FSR3 frame gen. Now, if you were able to get 60 FPS with FSR3 frame gen, I think it would probably look fine, but you can't achieve that. The reason NVIDIA's can look better here is because it does use deep learning. I don't like how unresponsive it feels, but I would probably play with it on because we have to. So let's go ahead and throw in a higher tier GPU. This is the RTX 4070 Super. It's really hard to see it because it's all black. But let's throw this one in. This GPU is $600. So it's double the price of the 4060. I think as we boot into the game here, yes, this game does have a shader compilation step that is really long. I'm talking like this is like, even with this CPU and everything, maybe with a faster GPU, it does go faster. We'll get to see that. But like this takes forever, but it does optimize all the shaders in the game. I haven't seen any shader compilation stutter. Let's see what it puts us on. We're at 4K, obviously. Let's turn off the frame rate cap. It is putting us on high graphics settings at 4K on DLSS balanced without frame generation on. So let's see what happens if we go ahead and head into game here. You can actually see, just upon loading in here, that the weather's changed. We are at 4K, by the way. Also, the character customization is kind of crazy. I think you can do a lot. Have fun. I think it was similar in Monster Hunter World as well. Yeah, you can see even at 4K on high settings with DLSS balanced, at times in this little area, we are CPU limited. See that percentage does go up, and our GPU usage percentage isn't all the way almost at 99% or 100%. It's crazy. Now our overall CPU usage does look a little bit higher. We can get to the mid 40s. Let's go ahead and go back out here where we were before. And see, you can also see that the weather is crazy. There's like this huge electrical thing here. It does look epic. You can see detail in it as well. I also made this other overlay here so you can kind of get an idea. So here is the CPU usage of every individual core along with this accompanied thread next to it as well. So on the right side is the thread, on the left side is the actual core. Yes, we are getting usage spread throughout the cores, but it's not that high. And I think what will be interesting is if we go ahead and we drop these settings down to 1080p again, okay, and then check this same thing, but at 1080p on a faster GPU. You can see at 1080p here, we can get limited on this GPU all the way down to like 60 to 70 FPS. Yeah, So the max FPS that you can get at all right now, no matter what your hardware is, 60 to 70 FPS in here, because it'll always be limited by this CPU. Now we can go out here. See, things get a little bit more GPU demanding. We're still only at like 60 FPS at 1080p, which does make me interested. Let's go back up to 4K. So we got up to 4K here without any upscaling on high settings. We're at about 30 FPS or so. Okay, we drop it to 1440p. You can actually see, yeah, we can get about 50 FPS. So if you wanted to play at 1440p, I think you could. It's crazy how touchy this is though. Let's go ahead and put it on quality upscaling and see how much more frames we can get. And get us over 60. Okay, so you could be out here running at 60 FPS or so, which feels so much better. That is crazy at 1440p. DLSS quality on high settings. The 4070 Super is getting CPU limited. And this is like, what about this is really that CPU limiting? Am I crazy? It does look good. I think it just has a lot of CPU problems. See, that looks epic. Once you get up close to the models, they're not that insane. But it's like you stand back here and you're like, wow, that is sick. Oh, this is the heart of that thing, actually. Ah, so this is probably the thing that makes all the electric storms, huh? Well, let's go ahead and throw in, I think, the 4080 Super, which is the fastest graphics card that I own, and see how that performs in this game, and if it allows it to just go crazy, or like see really what the CPU limits are. So we got the 4080 Super in here. Now let's just see what it defaults this to. So we're at 4K, uncapped frame rate, ultra graphics at DLSS quality at 4K. But can this GPU even handle it? This GPU is $1,000. $1,000 freaking dollars. Okay, so with the fastest, the second fastest GPU and the fastest CPU, we can still only hit 60 FPS in this area. It's a smooth 60, I will say that. Frame times are not atrocious, but we're clearly limited. So I think these are players. Are these players? And we're clearly CPU limited right now. You can see the percentage up there. It's CPU limited. Oh my god, man. That is rough. This is what all the CPU cores look like when they're lined up here, and the usage percentage and all that. I mean, it seems like it's evenly spread throughout the CPU, but we are still CPU limited, so it's kind of interesting. But let's see what happens if we go to high settings instead of ultra. Do we get better CPU performance? Because this is asking a lot. So graphically, I don't think the game is that insane, because this GPU, it's a very fast GPU, don't get me wrong, but it can handle it at 4K DLSS quality on ultra settings and still get CPU limited. So it seems like high settings is about the same as ultra in terms of CPU performance. And let's go ahead and just drop this down to 1080p and just see if this is all the frames that we can get. As you can see, we're actually still CPU limited, but what's really weird is dropping it to 1080p, we're getting higher FPS. So this is actually an interesting case. We're CPU limited, or we're limited by something. I think ray tracing is built in because I see dithering. Do you see that? Like, say like the shadows on her. There's like speckliness on it. The model quality in this game does look quite good, except for some things. Like, why the hell is this so shit? That log is just like untextured, basically. Same with the shield. Now, what could be interesting is in this game is you could cap your frame rate and turn on frame gen. So right now we're getting up to like the 90s. If you're CPU limited, frame generation should help even more. We could cap our frame rate to 60. Game looks quite smooth though. We can get 100 FPS with frame generation, so that's higher than we were getting. Because this game does get CPU limited quite a bit, what you can use frame gen for is to, whenever you're CPU limited, it's gonna work better. And that should average out your performance pretty well. I think let's go ahead and try out some AMD GPUs and give that a shot. As you can see up in the top left, I put in the RX 6600, which is a $200 GPU nowadays, so it's pretty much entry level. I have no clue. Let's see what it put us at. Lowest graphics preset, okay, or an ultra performance upscaling. There's no frame generation though. This is at 4K, so this is not really where you'd be playing with this GPU, but let's just see what it does at 4K. This is what the game can look like, and it looks like we're maxing out our VRAM, honestly. We're probably hitting it. This looks terrible. It's like you stand still and it looks okay, but then right when you start moving with FSR, the image just completely breaks down. Like, look at the soft shadows. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So let's go ahead and drop it down 1080p. Much more reasonable resolution for this GPU. Let's turn this up to medium settings maybe and just see what we can get away with. And we'll go no upscaling. Okay, we'll just try native. So this is native 1080p medium settings on this GPU. Holy shit. You can't run this. You can only get 40. Luckily, we're not CPU limited. The VRAM is almost maxed out too. Even want playable performance at 1080p medium. And we can try low. Let's try low. I'm not gonna do lowest, but we can try low. Okay, on low we can get some amount of frames. We can get up to 50. That's actually not terrible. That's not terrible. I mean, I guess you could play on low. Okay, I mean, it's running. What the f- What are you? What is it? What the dude? What the fuck? Bro, what? What the hell? Is that how it always looks on low settings? Bro, what is happening? What is this, like a Roblox mod or something? What is happening? Wait. If we go up to medium, does it fix this? I don't even know. Does it fix it? Oh my god, they just look like that. Maybe it doesn't have enough VRAM. Look at them. Dude. What the fuck? That's insane. Bro. Dude, look at these little polygons here. What do you got, 10 polygons on you? That's crazy. Is there any way to get it to run? What the hell? That's crazy. Okay, let's try to turn on FSR quality and see if that lowers our VRAM usage. Okay, so that lets the models come in. This is a thing with RE Engine. It will just like, it'll stream in textures and models. So let's go back to low settings, but we're on FSR quality now. So if you don't have enough VRAM, and it looks like we're probably just barely achieving the VRAM, you're gonna have a hard time running this, or you're gonna end up with a Roblox mod. It actually looks more like a Minecraft mod when they're like that. I mean, it runs. I guess it runs, but even $200 for this on a new game. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump up to the 7800 XT, which is probably one of AMD's most popular GPUs right now in the upper mid-range. We're on the 7800 XT, as you can see at the top left of the screen. Let's see what it defaults us on. So it puts us in high settings, FSR balanced at 4K. Okay, so in this little camp area at 4K FSR balanced, there's a lot of people here, and we're cooking up about 48 FPS. This is FSR balanced in high settings. So this can't really do 4K. Okay, if we have no upscaling on, we get about 37 FPS, 36 FPS. Very cinematic. At least the 1% lows are really quite good. That's definitely an upside. I would say this is more of a 1440p card, at least in this game. Sometimes this card can game at 4K pretty well, but we can get like 50 right here. But we can maintain 60. That does suck because this GPU is like a $400 to $500 GPU. It's barely maintaining 60. It does kind of suck. This is a similar GPU to what's actually going to be in the PS5 Pro. But the thing is with the PS5 Pro is it might get CPU limited because they didn't upgrade the CPU in the PS5 Pro. Let's go ahead and just turn on a little bit of FSR. I think FSR quality. So this is like rendering at 1080p and upscaling to 1440p. In this case, I think this is quite good. I think this would be probably how I would play the game. I think this is pretty reasonable. Now, if you see the VRAM usage, it is pretty high. We're over 8. We're at 9, and it's allocating up to 11. The allocation gives it space to play with, and it's probably going to start texture streaming if that is at your cap. This card has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so it looks like it's comfortable here. Seems like if you have 12 gigabytes, it would be perfectly fine for this. Would this get us CPU limited if for some reason you have this card and you're playing at 1080p? So let's go ahead and turn off any upscaling, and let's just see if we play at 1080p instead. We're getting about 80 FPS. We're not CPU limited right now. Yeah, at 1080p, if you were to have this card, it's gonna be fine. I would wish that you could get more than 80 FPS on a $450 card or whatever, $500 card. That's not what we're seeing. And it's probably partially because of CPU limits. You can see that we're dropping to 60 FPS. Are you crazy? Wow, this is 1080p, guys. Let's go to 1440p and see if we are CPU limited. Yeah, we were CPU limited. So we're getting limited at like 60 or so because there wasn't a huge FPS boost by jumping up to 1440. But let's go ahead and just throw in the Intel GPUs as well. I want to check out the A750 and the A770 and see how those perform, especially because I don't think those have drivers for this. So I'm downloading the Intel Arc drivers, right? I just wanted to see if there is anything about Monster Hunter Wilds. Here, there doesn't seem to be anything. So this is the latest driver. And if we go back, I mean, this was 1024. This is already getting pretty old for this time. And then Black Ops 6 and Diablo 4, A770 first. Arc card doesn't really even have drivers necessarily. Let's just drop this to 1080p and see how it handles it. Obviously, we can mess around with XeSS. It probably put us on ultra settings, probably because it's looking at our VRAM. Let's try medium at 1080p first. Damn. Damn, that is not good. Uh-oh. Oof, I do not have much faith for the A750. Dude, medium settings at 1080p and it can't even hit 30. This is an intensive area, so like, let's walk out just a little bit, okay? Let's walk out just a tiny bit. Well, it is kind of nice. Well, let's look at the textures really quick. That looks kind of muddy, you know? Let's just see. We can up the textures to ultra though. I can't really tell. Everything looks so blurry because it's 1080p upscaled to 4K right now, so I think it looks a little bit better. We just try it. We can mess with XeSS because we get native here, so we shouldn't get any weirdness. Still getting 30 FPS, and we're running below 1080p right now. If it's based off of XeSS 1.3, which I'm pretty sure it is, then yeah, it's going to be even less than 720p right now. So we're running at like 500p on low settings right now, and the A770 can't really run it. I would expect Intel is going to get some driver updates for this. The beta I thought was kind of a surprise. I didn't even know this was launched, but apparently it's been out for quite a few days now. I wouldn't even really consider playing this game on the lowest settings preset. Like, let's just look at it, but it is lowest. Although I can up the textures. Look at the pixels. You can count those. That looks like about 80 pixels. Oh, 82. Let's check out the A750. I can already feel the frames. Let's try high settings at 1080p. Oof. Oh, look at that. Yeah, I can't even do high settings. Look at them. Do these look like they're actually straight out of like an old Elder Scrolls game? Or you know those new like Chila art horror games? Yeah, it's like that. PS1 polygons over here. Look at this guy. Oh my god. Dude, you can't be serious, dude. 8 gigabytes is not good. Okay, it's still messed up even with quality upscaling. Low settings. This is crazy. Look at my cat. How are they still not loaded in? There's too many screenshots in this game. So if you want to run an 8 gigabyte GPU and a modern Monster Hunter game, I can't even jump off. This just looks so gross, man. What the fuck? She has no actual hand. It's not in the polygons. It's just like a... That's crazy. Okay, so you can see I have this PC booted up, and you can see I have a little tube of thermal paste sticking out the bottom of it because that's holding up my RTX 4080 Super because I don't have it on a case. It's just sitting on the motherboard box. I have the 5900X in here, so a slightly older CPU, still a pretty high-end CPU to this day. Let's go ahead and check how this performs in the game. You can see it's defaulting us at 4K here, ultra graphics on the quality upscaling DLSS, which is exactly what it did on the other one. So it seems to base your settings off of your graphics card, not your CPU. This CPU, which is a 12-core CPU, one of the top-end CPUs for AMD's last platform. So not the current one, but most people aren't on the current platform. It's slowly getting adoption, you know what I mean? Yeah, this is still CPU limited on here. We are still seeing like capped at 60 FPS, which is crazy. Over here, especially where there's more players, down in the 40s, 1% lows are kind of bad too. Now for reference, I'm using 32 gigs of RAM. It's in 2x6 configuration. The RAM is at 3600 megahertz, and it's actually at CL18. So it's pretty good RAM for DDR4. I mean, if you're on a 4090 and you had this CPU, it's just like, okay, well, you can't really even get 60 FPS. And just think if you're on the recommended CPU for the game. The recommended CPU is actually the 5600, which is a little bit slower than this CPU. They should be similar, but that's going to be slower. This is almost unacceptable, because who can play this? It doesn't matter how good your game looks or how good it plays if nobody can play it. And this is struggling. So just think if you're on a generation older CPU. So what happens if we get onto 1080p? Actually, let's do 1440p, because that's actually probably very reasonable. So this is DLSS quality on ultra settings. So pretty GPU limited, except for DLSS quality, but at 1440p instead. And you can see that we're just even more CPU limited. And if we walk back in here, the people are going to load back in, right? Very, very CPU limited. I don't know where everybody went. There's a bunch of people here just a second ago. So we can only get 60 FPS on like a good ass CPU. I can't even imagine what the PS5 is going to get then, because the PS5 is a generation behind this. But if you had a 4090, yeah, you can't run the game. And we're at 4K. I mean, that's 4K, man. Look at this. What? So what if we go somewhere where there really isn't animals and stuff? Okay, it seems like here we get to smooth out a little bit. Cause I'm not gonna lie, it feels choppy. You go around there and it's like chugging. This is a really high-end system still. This would basically be like if you kept your old CPU platform, but you just upgrade your GPU. Now the question is this a game that is gonna make people upgrade their systems? Because it does require a lot. It looks pretty good, I would say, and the systems are interesting. Could use some frame generation, and I can get us up to the 90s in FPS, which it still feels quite good, because this gets around the CPU. I also want to point out on 4K here, we do use quite a bit of VRAM. So this game, it's crazy. So it's very CPU demanding, it's very GPU demanding, and it's very VRAM intensive. Now in system RAM, it doesn't seem that crazy. I bet if you're running out of VRAM, your system RAM is going to get hit quite a bit. But this is crazy. Here's all the cores for the CPU. That's 12 cores, but they're split across 2 CCDs, so I'm not sure how much it utilizes each one. FrameGen does help, but for an excuse for not being CPU like optimized in the game, nah, it doesn't matter. Okay, the game runs so poorly. Yeah, we can get like 60 FPS on the CPU out here. And then up at the camp where there's a lot of people around, we were at like 40-ish FPS. This is embarrassing to put out. I guess it is a beta. We'll see if it gets better. But the fact of how their recommended specs are in the game, pushing for frame generation and stuff. I mean, frame generation is going to be good when you are CPU limited. Come on, this CPU should be able to at least, even in this area with a ton of people, should at least be able to achieve 60 FPS. At least. Let's go ahead and jump on the Intel system and give that a shot though. We are on the 13700K, so there's no face cam here because I'm recording locally. I'm using NVIDIA's app. It is as low of a performance hit as I can get it to be. So it defaults to this, we saw the 4080 Super in here, so this is pretty expected. Ultra quality with DLSS quality, we're at 4K. We're at DLSS quality at 4K ultra settings. So it can get like 60. So we're at 1440p now. You can see there's actually still a little bit of GPU overhead. What the f? If we go over by all the people, this isn't bad actually. But we are still CPU limited, it seems like. Let's drop it down to high settings, which I think is more reasonable probably. And we just seem to get even more. Intel CPU does seem to be performing about the same as the 7800X3D. Let's drop all the way to 1080p just to make sure that we're not at all GPU limited. So this is 1080p high settings on DLSS quality. Went around a lot of people in the 70s to like 80. So this feels good. To me, it feels smooth and tight. So keep that in mind. It feels good. I don't have any like really scientific benchmarks or anything right now. Probably do that at some point in time. But the Intel CPU does seem to be better in this title. Now in terms of like what you need, like this is a pretty latest generation platform. I don't know how Intel 12th gen would be on here. It's a lot better than the 5900X. We were at like the mid 50s over here. We're at like the mid 70s to 80. Some textures aren't loaded in. Okay. Here's the CPU cores running. The performance cores. Those are the ones I'm showing. There's obviously 8 more efficiency cores you could show, but they don't do anything in gaming. So those are the P cores. You can see there are some cores that peak quite a bit higher, like Core 6 and Core 2 are like at like 60, 50% or so. It is kind of cool. Like the world is completely dynamic. There's obviously some rendering bugs. Well, Monster Hunter Wilds. What did we learn? Well, this game runs like crap. CPU, GPU, VRAM, everything runs like crap. And what's crazy is, especially with the CPU side of things, even if you had like an RTX 4090, good luck getting over 60 FPS in this game. That GPU is kind of useless unless you turn on frame generation or something like that, which isn't really a real frame rate, and you're paying that much for the GPU. Why are you paying that much for it? Because of the CPU limitations, you get really stuck in this game. It's kind of wild just how demanding this game is, and it feels unnecessary. The game does look very good. The vistas and the systems that are in place in the game are quite impressive. I think it's cool. I think the game is fun as well. I've never played a Monster Hunter game before, but I think this is pretty fun. Maybe the older ones are better. I'm not sure. But nothing really makes me feel like it's like, wow, this should really be this taxing. I don't get it. I think the game does visually look good, and the landscapes and the detail is quite good. I think the model detail is quite good as well. Textures are pretty decent, but I don't get why it's this demanding. And this is a question I have with so many of these new games. It's like, well, they look good. They look better than games did a few years ago, but why is it this hard to run? It really takes away from the game because it can be as fun as it wants to be, but at the end of the day, if nobody can really run the game, it doesn't really matter. Especially in a game like Monster Hunter, it's like you actually want higher FPS in the game because it is pretty fast paced. I do want to mention that this is a beta. I obviously said this before in the video, but being a beta, it can change between launch. Obviously, I think that's why this beta test is so early in this demo, is they really are trying to probably get feedback, because a lot of games have beta tests like a month before the game launches, and in that time frame, nothing can really happen. But here, there's like 4 months in between the game launching, so there's actually a lot of time for stuff to happen in the meantime. Hopefully they can fix a lot of these issues, because the game can't launch like this. It's relying very heavily on upscaling and frame generation just to get anything done, and it still, when you turn on a bunch of upscaling, the game looks like bad. I want the best for it, because it's a very hyped game. People are very interested in it, and I think it's fun too. It deserves the best shot it can get. We can take, for example, a reference point with Dragon's Dogma 2 was the last RE engine game that Capcom released, and that game did struggle a lot at launch with performance, but it has gotten better over time. Again, with that game, I don't know why it's so demanding either. It's just, for some reason, it's so difficult to run. It's gotten better since launch. We might see that same path with Monster Hunter Wilds, so we'll check that out. Hopefully this kind of stuff stops happening, but I don't really think it will either. It seems like games are just gonna keep getting worse and worse from the start, and our hardware can't keep up with it. I don't get this path that we're going on. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and this helped you, and have a good one. I'm gonna see you in the next video, and peace.